Most small business owners don't fail because of a lack of passion. They fail because they're running blind. I'm Mark Anderson, and I help small business owners make data driven decisions using the information from their accounting records. My mission is simple. I want to make a dent in the small business failure rate by teaching you how to use your finances to make better decisions. Welcome to Business on the Run. I had done races prior to this race, this first half marathon, but it was the first time that I had ever decided to do something as grand and as big as a half marathon. I'll never forget the first time that I went on a run more than 10 miles. If you're a runner, you know that you're doing your short runs during the week when you've got the time to do it, and then you do your long runs on Saturday or Sunday. I did my first double digit run on a Saturday, and it about killed me. I finished the run, and all that I wanted to do for the rest of my Saturday was just sit and watch TV. And that was it. I was so wiped out tired. Now, that I'm doing races that are obviously much, much longer, 10 miles seems like a drop in the bucket now, and I'm sure that there are plenty of lessons to be learned just in that. Anyway, I made it to the starting line, and I started at the back because I had this insecurity that I did not wanna get in the way of all of the other runners that were, in my mind anyway, clearly better than me. And the first mile I ran was the slowest mile that I ran, not because I didn't have it in me to run it, but because of all the traffic, because the beginning of the race is that's where everybody's all bunched up and together, and to be bobbing and weaving within, around all of these people was rather time consuming. By the time I finished the marathon, and despite starting at the very, very back of the field, I ended up finishing 7th in my age group. That was pretty uplifting for me. The big lesson that I took away from that is that I was a lot better runner than I gave myself credit for. And I think that that's probably the case with virtually everything that we do, right? Whatever the case may be, whether it's small business, whether it's accounting and finance, it's sales and marketing or whatever, you are better at it than you give yourself credit for. I started to take those lessons to heart, and that's why I feel like there really are so many parallels with fitness and running because you can take those lessons and basically apply those same lessons in business. The one disappointment that I had honestly was finishing the race because I'll never forget it was like I've been looking forward to doing this half marathon for probably 2 or 3 months. I finished it, and by the time I had gotten to my car to drive home from the race, I was like, what's next? It was like that was the mentality. It had shifted from, "Holy crap, I finished 7th starting at the back of the field. Where could I have finished if I had started a little closer to the front, right? Could I have placed? I don't know, maybe. We'll never know." But to having that level of euphoria to get into the car going, "What am I gonna do next?" So the only thing that I could think of to do next was to get my phone out and find another race. And that is really the big lesson that I learned there is that it's not the destination, it's the journey. It's not the goal, it's the process. And if you don't enjoy the process, then the goal is really irrelevant. That became the habit. I really overcame that very quickly. That feeling of disappointment. I still felt what I felt at the end of the race, but I knew what I was going to do as well. The next thing is naturally to simply put another race on the calendar, right? So that became the thing, and then eventually that goal of putting more races on the calendar morphed into trying to do a half marathon in all 50 states. And I eventually stopped doing that, but for a different reason than you might think. It was kind of funny at this point, I'm dating Trish, my wife now today, and I was like, "Look, I've never not run a half marathon since I started this goal, and I need to go to some state that I haven't been to so that I can keep this thing on track," right? So I decided I was gonna go to Oklahoma, and I was gonna run in a half marathon there. And the one thing that she said to me was, "You're planning on running a 50-mile race in just a few months, and what are you doing wasting your time with this little half marathon? You're doing half marathons all the time for training runs, basically." And so that was why I ended up stopped doing it, because it was like that sort of resonated with me as like, you've got much bigger, grander goals on the table now with the ultra marathons. So that was the last half marathon that I did in another state. And I still actually wouldn't mind fulfilling that 50 state objective just in a different way, rather than doing like a half marathon, doing a race in every state. So maybe one of these days we'll get back to that goal at some point. But the running goal shifted a little bit in that we went from doing the half marathons to doing longer races. It alluded to a 50-mile race. The first 50 miler that I had done was down in Brazos Bend State Park. And that was just a whole lot of fun because of the length of the race. It was the first time I'd ever done anything quite that far before. I knew I was gonna need to be changing my shoes. I knew I was gonna need to eat quite a lot, because you're burning roughly 100 calories per mile. I know I was definitely not consuming that much to make up for what I was burning every mile, but I ended up running my first 50-mile race in a little under 9 hours. And it wa it was funny because I remember my mom messaging on social media at the time. She was like, "That's like running for a whole day." So I got kind of a kick out of that. But anyway, another interesting story with respect to the half marathons, that 50 miler eventually graduated me to moving to a longer race. So the next natural step was to do a 100-kilometer race, which is 62.2 miles. And I wanna say the first and only one that I ever did was in Paris, Texas. And that was kinda neat, because you were running through the little Eiffel Tower that they have there. While it was definitely an ultra marathon race, it was not on trails like I was really kind of hoping it would be. It was really on an asphalt path, and it was an out and back, I wanna say 4 times. It was an interesting race for a few reasons. One of the things that I did on the very first lap, I basically shot myself in the foot because I overshot the first turnaround point by a mile and a half. And so by the time I figured it out, I turned around because I didn't see any runners around me. And it was like they were there, and then all of a sudden they were all gone. So I knew I had done something off. That turned into, well, crap, I'm behind the field now. I've gotta catch up. So I had done that. That was in the first 10 miles, right? So it's like, if I remember correctly, it was like 17 miles out, 17 miles back. I forget the exact math behind it all, but it was 4 laps back and forth. So within less than 10 miles, I had screwed up the course, and I still wanna do well in this race. So I started to just gradually catch up. I eventually caught up with the rear end of the field, and I started to pass another racer and another racer and another racer. And it's also getting hot. And if you know much about ultra racing, most of the runners are wearing some sort of a pack on them with hydration. And I was too. You'll have food on it as well. And I knew that I was starting to catch up to the front of the field at this point, but you're getting so hot. And I don't know if you guys have ever run in the heat before, but I mean, there is not too many more debilitating things than to run in the heat. And I came up with a solution for it. Basically, at every aid station, I started to dump as much ice as I possibly could into my pack. And it was like running with AC on. I was completely soaked, but the point being is that it kept me cool, and I could keep going, and I could keep going. So that I took the time that I used to fill the packs more than outweighed the amount of time that I caught up during the run. And I ended up finishing the race in first place for the men, but believe it or not, second overall. Actually had a female beat me. But she was apparently, I'd learned later that she was a professional runner or more of an elite racer, so I didn't mind losing so much. What it reminded me of was, and one of the things that I thought about a lot was the player's ability test that I had squeaked by with my perseverance. Despite having overshot the turnaround point, I gradually chipped away at the people in front of me, just one person at a time. If I can just pass the next guy, then I can just keep going and all. That's just the mentality that I took. Was I kept just, where's the next person in the field that I can pass? That was just an example of one of the lessons. And I'll make this next story somewhat brief, but I remember doing another run at the Hill Country State Natural Area. And I want to say this was another 100-kilometer race as well. And if you've ever been out to Hill Country State Natural Area, it is a very, very rugged place. Lots of rocks, lots of very steep hills. It was really a treacherous terrain to run on. But I remember my first lap within 5 miles of starting the race that I took a sip from my water, and the bite valve on my water popped off and went into the tall grass, and I couldn't find it. Now, if you're a runner and you know how to use the vests, if you let that down, or you don't even need to know this, basic physics will tell you if it's going to drain out, right? So somehow I had to figure out, I was going to either have to hold it or do something. So what I ended up doing was I actually took the tube and I wrapped it in my cap so that it would stay high. And then when I needed to drink, I took my whole cap off, sucked it out of there like a straw, and then put my cap back on. And that was a lesson in adaptation, right? You have something that happens and it's unexpected and obviously not the best thing in the world to happen for your race, but you've got to figure out a way to persevere. And it's one of the reasons that I really enjoy doing the ultra races, because it requires a lot of planning. But the one thing that I can tell you too, it doesn't matter how good of a planner you are for this sort of race, or whether it's life or even in business. It's kind of like what Mike Tyson says, you can plan for a fight, but all bets are off as soon as you get hit in the face, right? Well, it's the same sort of thing here. That was what I learned there, was the adaptation. So as you may have noticed, one of the progressions that has taken place with my running is that, I started with a half marathon. Obviously, I'd done marathons along the way as well, but then it graduated. It went to a 50-mile race and then a 100K race. Well, that eventually morphed into me doing 100-mile races as well. And I think that was really where I sort of hit my sweet spot. And one of the things that I really loved about ratcheting up those numbers and those goals was really just to see how far I could push myself. Could I really do a 50-mile race? Oh, yes, I can. Can I do a 100-kilometer race? Oh, yes, I can. So then naturally the next question was, can I do a 100-mile race? And one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about a 100-mile race, even as opposed to 100K and 50-milers, is both of those races are single-day events, right? They will happen between 10 and probably 12, 13 hours, depending on how fast a runner you are. That was about what I would do. As soon as I hit that 100-mile threshold, now it basically became a multi-day event, or at least an overnight event, right? And so I was able to really push myself to really see if I was capable of hitting those numbers running wise. And the thing I enjoyed most about the 100-mile races as opposed to the shorter ones was really the logistics behind it all, meaning all of the planning. When you're running 100 miles, you're going to have to eat, you're going to have to drink, you're going to have to change your shoes. The last big one that you really need to worry about is lighting, because you're running at night, guaranteed. Therein lies the questions. How much food do you bring? How many changes of clothes? How many pairs of shoes? How many pairs of socks? How much lighting do you need? And that was really the big variable, because it's like, how long are these batteries going to last? And, so I always ended up trying to carry more than I actually needed. And the first 100-mile race that I did it at Sam Houston State Park up in Huntsville. And a lot of lessons in that race, but first and foremost, having a team that can help you, and that was my wife. Trish was my Sherpa for the race. She did an absolutely fantastic job making sure that every pack that I had was ready to go. And sorry, starting to think about something that she helped with because I'd run three laps, get to the fourth lap, and around the 70-mile mark, my foot is hurting so badly. Every stride, I feel like I'm stepping on a nail, just piercing right through my foot with every stride that I take. And I get to the Jeep where she's got everything set up. And I was like, I was going to quit. I wanted to quit so badly. I wanted to quit. And she bandages up my foot and she says, "You're finishing this race. You're going to get out there, go as far as you possibly can until you've got no other choice than to make it out the other side." And that's exactly what I did. But before I got to that point where I finished, I had the opportunity to be a good Samaritan. Around the 90-mile mark, I ran into this guy who just looked like he was wandering around out in the woods aimlessly. And I was like, "Dude, is there anything that I can do to help you? What is going on? Can I help?" And he tells me that the battery went out on his last set of lights. And I was like, "Pff, no problem. I got you covered. I've got the light that I'm wearing right now on my head. I've got a thing and a light that you can basically, magnetic light that you can strap to your belt or anywhere on your pack or wherever you want it. And you're more than welcome to have that. I've also got this flashlight, no problem. I've got you covered." Right? So he starts to go again. And I guess the funny part was obviously I caught up to him. I'm passing him, and he promises me that I'll get you your light back when I finish. And I go, "Dude, it is like a $15 light. It's all good. I'm gonna finish. If I keep going at the pace I'm going and you keep going at the pace you're going, I'll be long gone by the time you get there. It's all good. Don't worry about it. You use the light. It's no problem." And so he's got a light. He's back on track. I'm on track. And basically, I get to the last aid station on this course. So I'm at the 95-mile mark. I get some food and drink to make it the last 5 miles. And I am no farther than, well, and you know what? I need to backtrack just a little bit because before approaching that last aid station, my headlamp it started fading and went out by the time I made it to the aid station. So that left me with that one flashlight. So I've got that. I started to use that to and approach the aid station. I got my food, and I am no more than 100 yards or so past that aid station when that flashlight completely goes out. That was my last light, except for the one that I gave away on the 90-mile mark, right? So, basically, that put me in a situation where I had to walk the last 5 miles of this race. Otherwise, I was gonna face plant into a root or something like that because it was not like the Hill Country State Natural Area in terms of terrain, but it was still pretty, in the dark anyway, lots of roots and some hills here and there. But until I got to where I was close enough to the parking lot and I could see the finish line and everything was lit up, I had to walk that entire distance. And I was still able to finish that race in a little under 22 hours. And the lessons learned, I guess I could have kept that light for myself, but I see that as being able to, to be just simply a good human being and to help someone out in need, but also from the perseverance perspective. And I talk a lot about perseverance, not only in running, but in business, because it is such an important part. It's probably the most important component that a business owner has to have in their repertoire to operate is perseverance. So I was able to plow through the darkness in the last 5 miles of that race just through sheer perseverance. Some of the lessons that I'd like to just sort of summarize from my talk about running and getting to ultra distances is being able to adapt. You've got to be able to adapt. If you're like most small business owners, type A personalities, you achieve some sort of a goal and the next goal has to be bigger and better. And I feel like that's definitely the way that I've gone with my running. People think I'm crazy for saying this, but there are races out there that are far, far longer than 100 miles. The Moab 240, which I would one day love to be able to do, but we'll see when that happens. That may be pie in the sky, but who knows, right? So being able to ratchet up those dreams even bigger and bigger. And that holds true in running and health and fitness as it does in business. And the last one is really the lessons in perseverance and really persistence, right? When things are hard, you just got to keep going, keep moving forward, just don't stop. Thank you for listening to this episode. It was a pleasure spending some time with you today, and I really appreciate you giving me this time out of your day. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. And I hope you will listen to this podcast and share this podcast with others. And if it's your first time, I hope that you like it and continue to listen to it. And please check out the show notes because we've got all of our social media feeds there. I'd love to see you there too. And thank you for listening to Business on the Run.